Hey, namaste and welcome. I'm Kay, this is Ecstatic Self, and today I'm responding to a follower question. So on a recent video, someone commented, Kay, could you please talk about using meditation and spiritual work to help us heal our childhood trauma? I'm going to take that question, I'm going to extrapolate on it a little bit, and I'm going to dive into the idea of how can we use our spiritual work to help us heal and grow when focusing on the past, whether that's a positive experience or a challenging experience. How can we use mindfulness to mine the past to heal the future? So that's what I want to talk about today. If that's interesting to you, please watch on. Our youths, or maybe not even just our youths, maybe just the past, our teenage years, our young adult years, depending on where you are, your middle adult years, your late adult years, even perhaps. There are so many things that have happened in our lives that have contributed to the people we are now. I'm a firm believer that we wouldn't be the people we are right now if it weren't for the things that happened before us, whether you view those things in a positive or negative light. And depending on your belief system or your experiences that you've had in meditation, possibly even way back before that, maybe even in previous lifetimes, those things could still be affecting us now, because every action we take, every experience that we have generates karma, generates what are called samskaras, or impressions on our psychic energy field. And as we grow and develop, those impressions call to experiences, they call to our karma, and we have to go through things, and those further experiences continue to make us who we are. So from the spiritual perspective, there are billions of different things contributing to the experiences we're having today because of the choices and happenings that occurred in our past, in this lifetime, in our childhood, in our adolescence, or perhaps even hundreds of years before, hundreds of lifetimes before. So before we dive into the idea of how do we work with these past experiences to create healing in the now, I think it's important we revisit an idea that I've talked about many times on this channel, but is complex and nuanced, and something I still work on pretty much every day. And that is getting out of the habit of thinking of things as being either good or bad, positive or negative, beneficial or traumatic. Instead, we need to get to a place where we just see everything as just being an experience. It is what it is, as I often like to say. Because how often have we had experiences where in the moment, it felt awesome, it was great. But then a few weeks or a few months later, you look back and you're like, oh, that was so stupid. Why did I do that? Why did I go get that tattoo or that piercing? Why did I marry that person? Why did I have that crazy sexual experience in the back of a club? Vice versa, you can have experiences that feel grueling and traumatic and hard, but then a few years later you look back and see, actually, that gave me something. It gave me growth. It gave me humility. It maybe gave me a better footing in my life moving forward. Like, I really struggled to save money, but now I'm really grateful that I went through it. In the paraphrased words of Shakespeare's lead character in Hamlet, nothing is either good nor bad, but thinking makes it so. We need to get out of this paradigm of an experience in our past or present or future being bad or being good, and just say it was what it was. Because when we label, when we start to categorize something as being a negative experience, we start to disassociate from it. We start to devalue it. We say, I don't want to learn what that experience came to teach me. I just want to block it out. I don't want to go there. But when we just sit with it and take it as it is, then it can provide many lessons. And even when we extend this argument to people, right, that person's a good person, that one's a bad person, that person's holy, that person's a sinner. And then instead just say, everybody is human, everybody is what they are. It gives us a tremendous amount of grace and a tremendous amount of compassion for our brothers, sisters, and gender fluid siblings. And it is my personal belief that there is no such thing as positive or negative energy. There is just energy. Everything is made out of the same vibrations, the same soul stuff, the same divinity, if you want to think of it that way. And sometimes it's in a tight, constricted vibration, and sometimes it's in an open, expansive vibration, but it's still the same energy, just vibrating at different frequencies. And if everything is made of God, then how can there be nothing that isn't? How can there be anything that is lesser or greater? So that's how I try to approach it. There's nothing good, there's nothing bad. It's just at a different vibration. Yeah, we could say that that experience was uncomfortable, and that experience was comfortable or joyful. Sure, that's a fair qualifier, but I don't want to label it as being a negative or positive experience. So for you, dear viewer, this is step one. When we talk about dealing with childhood trauma, I think we need to start with a reframing, and more than just reframing, but having a deep experience of this idea of neutrality. all is what it is. I'm not going to view things as good or bad. And so that word trauma starts to dissipate a little bit. Now, to thoroughly contradict myself, because that's what I do as a spiritual coach, is to examine all angles, even if they sound contradictory. If you do have a tremendous amount of childhood trauma, I enthusiastically recommend that you make sure that you're getting the support you need through a psychiatrist or psychologist, a social worker, that you find modalities that are helpful for you to really deal with that stuff. There is a term that comes up called spiritual bypassing, which is to say, oh, I'm just a spiritual person now. I've surrendered it. I don't need to work on it anymore. I've just let it go. Well, we have to face our shit sooner or later, and psychological perspectives can be tremendously helpful in your healing journey. Not to say that those are necessarily the best means for you at this point. Sometimes approaching it from a more spiritual means is better. Sometimes maybe you feel like you need to go the route of an exorcism or go to visit a shaman and explore plant medicine. Like maybe that's the way you need to work on healing these parts of yourselves. The point is, don't avoid doing the hard work. Seek out those who will help you on your journey. And to just be clear, as we're doing this video today, I am not a licensed mental health professional. I am not here offering guidance as a therapist or as a caseworker. Please seek out those individuals to help you if you feel like that's what you need moving forward. Okay, so we've established the idea that there's nothing good and nothing bad. Now, what does that mean when we're reflecting on the past, and how can we use the past to help us grow? Well, I'm glad you asked, and I'm glad you're still with me. One of the things that I like to explore in my spiritual work is the concept of what I call deep time. Now, at some point you might have heard a different spiritual master say the idea that time and space are just illusions of this realm, of this plane of consciousness. That time and physical space don't actually exist. It's just our minds processing our inputs as such. And personally, I find a lot of truth to this. How many of you have had moments that are memory-based but feel so real as if they're happening again right now? I mean, that's one of the prime symptoms of PTSD, right? To re-experience a trauma as if it were happening again and again. Not that I like necessarily using that word because it has a negative connotation, but it's part of the name, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Memories live in us. The mind really doesn't distinguish very well between what is imagined and what really occurs. When the imagination is vivid enough, it fires the same neural pathways as if an experience is really happening. This is why reading in particular is such a powerful tool, because it engages the imagination in a much stronger way than film and television and makes the brain think that these events are actually happening, which is part of the reason I love writing, that I love books, that's a medium I choose to explore in my consumption and my artistic creation. But when we start to pair meditation with this idea, well, then really exciting things begin to occur. If we take this idea of the mind being very powerful to re-experience past events as if they're fully happening, and then we enter a space where the mind is centered, open, and reconnecting with a distant point in the past, it really feels like we can go and revisit it. We can go and relive it. Now, like I said, some spiritual masters say that that's actually a thing, that when you expand the mind enough, you can step out of your timeline and view your whole life as simultaneously existing. That the parts of you in the past and the parts of you in the future are all here and now, that they are all present still within you, because you are living all of them simultaneously. It's just the limitation of our mind to make us see our progression through life in a chronological fashion. Now, that might be a bit of an advanced meditation for you yet. Definitely something to be working towards, but something we can do in the interim, something we can do just more simply and easier, is to go back into your seat and at the same time go back into a moment that has caused you some mild distress. So again, if you're working with a severe level of distress, I hope you're working with a mental health professional. Don't dive in right to that moment that's terrorizing you. We don't want to go into, the worst experience of your life and try to work there. We want to start with something that's a little bit easier, that only brings up a level 1 or level 2 stress response in the body. And by working on these smaller things, we can build up our skill set, build up our resiliency, and gradually over time tackle bigger and bigger events that we want to revisit. But just like going to the gym, you're not going to start out weightlifting by picking up a 60-pound dumbbell and deciding you're going to curl it. You're going to start with the 5-pound dumbbells and work your way up. So from your meditation seat, you can go and find an experience that feels mildly uncomfortable. Maybe sometime someone said something that really hurt you, or maybe a moment that was really embarrassing. And then as you sit in your meditation seat, allow that experience to come up But allow yourself to be there as you are right now, that you in your current level of maturity are going back and revisiting these points of trauma in the past. And realize how, with your current level of well-being, if you were back experiencing this again, 9 times out of 10, it really wouldn't have been a big deal. So for myself, for example, when I was a young actor newly out of college, I got hired by a large equity theater to understudy one of their big shows. During the rehearsal process, the artistic director kept being, verbally abusive towards me, and then one day made it clear that he hired me because he wanted to have sex with me. And when I did not reciprocate the feelings, especially because at that point I was fully closeted and did not think of myself as queer in any way, the bullying got much worse. For many years after that, I had a high level of resentment, a high level of feeling abused and hurt, feeling like that was so inappropriate, feeling like I was being traumatized by the experience, right? To bring back that word, trauma. And through my own healing work, I eventually came to terms with the experience and loved and forgave, and have had lovely conversations with this individual in the more recent years, and absolutely feel no ill will towards him whatsoever. Send him a lot of light and blessings, and realize that, that was inappropriate, but we all do shit like that from time to time. But when I go back in my meditative seat and envision myself back in time in this space, as I am right now, I would just be like, dude, fuck off. You're good. Leave me alone. That's inappropriate. Like, it wouldn't even register too much as a big deal. Yeah, like, I probably would have come home and told my husband about it and, been like, this was so stupid. But it wouldn't be something that caused me years and years of hardship. So give yourself that same opportunity. Go back as you are now and see how, if this had happened to you as you are now, it'd be like, I could handle it. I'd be fine. And maybe give yourself permission to re-envision the experience with you taking control, with you being as you are now, and see how it plays out differently. The funny thing is we as humans are already inclined to do this type of work, to do this kind of exercise. If you watch young children after a traumatic event at their school, like a school shooting, the little ones, the kindergartners, first graders, they'll go and reenact the school shooting on the playground over and over. And each time they retell it, it starts to shift a little bit. And eventually it usually ends up in a place where the children feel empowered and stop the gunman, that they saved their colleagues. This retelling of the narrative with them being empowered has a tremendously healing psychological effect on them. So this work I'm encouraging us to do today is really not all that different from work that we already intuitively do when we're younger and not blocking ourselves so much. Now again, if you feel a high level of stress response from this exercise, take a break. Maybe consult with a mental health professional. I am not here offering psychological advice. I'm just telling you of ways that you can work on this from a spiritual perspective to help you with your healing and growth. Now, this exercise doesn't just work with more painful experiences. It can also work with joyful experiences as well. You can actively go back and revisit times when you first fell in love, times where you felt celebrated, times where there was tremendous joy and inclusion and festivities in your life. All those moments are likewise still happening. And when we enter a place of stillness, when we enter deep time, those moments can continue to be as real now as they were then. So try this with me. Breathe deep, let everything go, and then single out a moment that you'd like to revisit. Don't try to make it happen, but just let the sensations come back to you. And remind yourself that you are as you are now, with your current level of insights and self-understanding and maturity, that you'll garner new information about why people behaved the way they did, why you responded the way you did, and approach it with a greater level of humility, grace, and surrender. And then as you're in the experience, feel yourself breathing in a circular way, down the front, up the back. And when we breathe in this manner, we start to break down tension. We start to break down and dissolve whatever's there that we need to absorb. It uses a spiritual mechanism for healing and growth, this circular breathing. So digest whatever's there. Break it down, pull it into you. Allow yourself to feed on this experience for your growth, for your healing, and for your joy. And when you feel like you've reached a pausing point, that you've taken from the experience what you need, offer up gratitude. Feel gratitude expanding out of your heart and upwards for this moment, for this exercise, for the opportunity to heal and grow. Each of us are far more complex than we think. Each of us have far greater histories affecting who we are than we realize. There are billions and billions of happenings, instances, karmic things that make you who you are, and we'll never be aware of all of them. So is it important that we consciously go back and heal these childhood and earlier life experiences? Well, sometimes maybe. Can we go ahead and process them without ever consciously thinking about them? Absolutely. And that's part of why we do our spiritual work every single day. We sit down, we breathe, we meditate, because our subconscious mind starts to process. We start to do this breaking down experience without having to revisit them. So even just by doing a regular meditation practice every day, you'll find that your past becomes less tangible, has less of a hold on you. You start to break down those memories, break down those feelings, and use them for your current and future growth and well-being. I hope this was helpful in some way to you. Thank you so much for the viewer who recommended this as a video topic. Again, I do not want to stress hard enough that if you feel overwhelmed by this, please, please, please do seek out guidance from a mental health professional, and that is not me. I am just here as a spiritual guide and traveler alongside of you. If anyone else has any other recommendations for videos they'd like to see me make, please feel free to drop it in the comments or shoot me an email or a DM on social media. And if you enjoy this kind of work, please feel free to join me in the community we're building on Patreon, patreon.com/ecstaticself, or consider working with me one-on-one through personal coaching. You can also check out my book, Journey to the Ecstatic Self, available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever books are sold. Thank you for being you.